I always came in earlier than I needed to. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was loneliness. The coffee shop on the corner opened at 7, and I was usually at the counter by 7:05. Not because I loved their burnt espresso, but because it gave me something to do before heading into the office. She was usually there before me. Not waiting, not rushing, just already settled into her spot near the window. Same black notebook open, same cup half finished, steam already fading. I knew she was older, mid-40s maybe, but the word older never really fit her. She carried herself like someone who'd figured out how to be alone without being lonely. At least that's how it looked from the outside. The first time she noticed me, it wasn't even intentional. I'd fumbled with too much change at the counter, quarters scattering to the floor. She glanced up from her notebook, gave a tiny half smile, then went back to her page. For some reason, that half smile stuck. Weeks passed like that. My order never changed, medium drip, no sugar, no milk, and one morning the barista handed it over before I even opened my mouth. "Regular for you," she said. That was the same morning the woman by the window caught my eye and said quietly, "You're a creature of habit." I remember fumbling again, this time with words. "Guess I like knowing what I'll get." She tapped her notebook with her pen, as if underlining something only she could see. "Or maybe you just don't want to be disappointed." Then she went back to writing. I sat 2 tables away from her after that. Not next to her, not across, just close enough that her presence filled the silence I didn't want to admit was heavy. Some mornings we spoke. Sometimes not. But the pattern changed. She remembered my name, I learned hers. Anna. She was, in fact, my boss. I hadn't realized it at first because she wasn't in my direct line, but eventually I pieced it together. Director level, mid-management, one of those people who kept everything moving quietly in the background. At work she was all business. But at the cafe, she laughed more. Not loud, not reckless. Just enough. One Tuesday, she slid her notebook aside and asked, "Don't you ever get tired of drinking the same thing every morning?" I shook my head. "I don't like surprises." She smiled again, the kind of smile that notices more than it says. "That's because you're still young. Surprises don't always mean loss." I didn't know what to say to that. So I folded the edge of my napkin into smaller and smaller squares until my fingers couldn't work it anymore. She noticed. She noticed everything. The mornings started to feel like hours, though we never said that. A small ritual carved out of routine. If I skipped a day, she'd raise an eyebrow the next. "Overslept?" And I'd nod, though the truth was I'd sat on my bed staring at unsent texts on my phone, fingers hovering over names I didn't have the courage to press. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something my quiet mornings didn't have before her. That Friday, as I got up to leave for the office, she stopped me with a simple question. "Do you ever stay, after work? Just to talk?" Her hand rested on the spine of her notebook, not moving. Her eyes didn't flinch. I nodded, though my throat felt dry. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. From her. "Don't tell anyone. Coffee after 6. Her text lingered in my pocket all day, like a secret burning against my leg. "Don't tell anyone. Coffee after 6. 6 came slower than usual. The office lights hummed, keyboards clattered, and I caught myself glancing too often toward her glass-walled office. She never looked back, not once. By the time I left, my palms felt damp, as if I were heading into something more dangerous than just coffee. She was already there when I arrived, same window table, but a different cup this time. Tea. Steam rising like she'd been waiting long enough for it to cool, long enough to think better of asking me here at all. "You came," she said. No smile, just a statement. "You asked?" I replied, setting my bag down. For a while neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. It was aware. She tapped her fingers against the rim of her mug, and I noticed how careful her hands were, always deliberate, as though nothing she touched was accidental. Finally, she said. I used to come here with my ex-husband. Before he was my ex. I didn't move. She didn't look at me when she said it, only at the cup. We sat at that table over there. He hated the tea. Said it tasted like boiled grass. A dry laugh, soft. But he came anyway. That's how I knew he still tried for a while. I didn't know what to say, so I only nodded. I folded the paper sleeve from my cup into a strip, twisted it until it nearly tore. You're too young to sit through stories like this, she said after a pause. Maybe, I answered. But you told me anyway. That made her look at me. Really look. Her eyes had the kind of weariness that didn't come from lack of sleep, it was older, deeper. And in that moment, the distance between 22 and 46 felt like a canyon I shouldn't be standing near. The risk pressed itself in. She was my boss, she was twice my age, she was someone with a life already half lived. But the pull was there too, quiet and persistent. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, almost under her breath. Neither do I said, though my chest felt like it knew too well. We stayed in that silence until the cafe lights dimmed for closing. She slid her notebook into her bag, and for a moment I thought that was it. One strange evening, nothing more. But as we stepped outside, she reached for my sleeve to stop me, her fingers brushing against my wrist. It was nothing, really. Barely a touch. But the warmth of it stayed, stronger than the tea, stronger than the doubts. Good night, she said, voice steady, eyes not quite. I nodded. Good night. And as I walked away, the place where her hand had been felt like it carried the weight of something we weren't supposed to start. After that night, the air between us changed. Not at work, there, she was the same Anna everyone knew, decisive, composed, sharp in meetings. But mornings at the cafe, they were different. Every glance felt heavier, every silence thicker. One Wednesday, she didn't show. I lingered longer than usual, pretending to check emails, the coffee cooling untouched. It was just one missed morning, but it unsettled me. I kept checking the door, half expecting her to walk in late, brushing rain off her coat, nodding at me like nothing had shifted. She didn't. By the time she returned the next day, I had practiced not looking surprised. She noticed anyway. Busy yesterday, she said simply, sliding her notebook onto the table. I nodded, but my stomach nodded. She hadn't said too busy for you, but that's how it sounded in my head. We sat in silence, but it wasn't the easy silence of before. My hands kept folding the edge of a napkin, pressing it flat, then crumpling it again. She noticed that too. Don't, she murmured, eyes flicking to my hands. You'll tear it. Her voice, soft, almost careful, stilled me more than the words themselves. We might have left it there. But that evening, as I stayed late at the office, she passed by my desk. Still here? Yeah. Reports. She hesitated, then leaned closer. Don't let this place eat your nights. It's not worth it. Her tone was protective, not professional. Like it mattered to her if I left the building tired or not. I wanted to say something back, something real, not work small talk. But before I could, another colleague passed through. Anna straightened instantly, her distance snapping back into place. Finish soon, she said briskly, and walked away. The shift rattled me. One moment close, the next unreachable. The following morning, I caught her outside instead of inside. She was on the sidewalk, fumbling with her phone, brow furrowed. I slowed, unsure if I should approach. She saw me, slipped the phone back into her bag, and forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said. Too quickly. Then, after a pause, my son called. He doesn't really approve of much these days. I didn't press. She didn't explain. But in that pause, I felt the sharp edge of the risk, what this might mean to her family, to her life outside these mornings. Inside the cafe, we sat closer than usual. The barista even gave us a look, one of those fleeting, curious ones. Anna shifted in her seat, almost as if she'd felt the eyes too. Our knees brushed under the table by accident. Or maybe not accident. Neither of us moved away right away. I glanced up. Her pen hovered over the page, unmoving. Her lips parted like she might speak, but no words came. I leaned in, just slightly, just enough that the space between us tightened. She closed her notebook instead. The sound was soft, but final. Her eyes met mine. "Don't," she whispered. Not angry. Not cold. Just afraid of something she couldn't name. And yet, she didn't move away. It happened after work on a Thursday. The kind of day when the office felt heavier than usual, people moving slower, voices dragging. I found myself leaving at the same time as her. Pure accident, or maybe not. The street outside was unusually quiet. The evening light stretched long shadows across the pavement. She walked beside me, hands buried in her coat pockets, gaze fixed straight ahead. "You're quiet," I said, careful, as if speaking too loudly might shatter whatever thread held us side by side. "I'm always quiet," she replied. But her tone lacked its usual ease. We reached the park a block from the office, and she slowed near a bench. Without asking, I sat with her. She didn't move away, though I noticed her shoulders tense, then release, like she'd been holding something in. For a while, we just listened to the faint rush of cars on the next street over. Then she said softly, "I saw you laughing with Claire today." It took me a moment. "Claire from marketing?" She nodded, eyes still on the ground. "You looked comfortable." The way she said it, like she wasn't supposed to notice, but had anyway, made my chest tighten. "She told a bad joke," I said. "That's all." Her lips pressed together, as if she didn't quite believe me, or maybe she just didn't trust herself to ask more. I wanted to tell her the truth, that no joke from Claire, no glance from anyone else, ever stayed with me the way one half-smile from her did. But the words caught somewhere in my throat. Instead, I said, "You don't have to worry." That made her finally look at me. Her eyes held something raw, jealousy, maybe, or fear, or something even harder to name. "It's not about worry," she said. "It's about boundaries. Ones I'm not sure I'm keeping anymore." Her voice cracked on the last word. Not much, but enough. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to catch her gaze again. "Boundaries only matter if they're protecting something real." Her breath hitched. She turned her head away quickly, like the air between us was too sharp. "You don't understand," she said, almost to herself. "You can go home tonight and nothing changes. But me, if anyone knew." She stopped, pressing a hand over her mouth for a second. Then she lowered it, steadied her voice. "I can't afford to slip." Her words felt like walls going back up. But the way her hand trembled slightly where it rested on her lap, that was something else entirely. I wanted to reach for it. Just to steady her hand, to let her know she wasn't alone in this silent war with herself. My fingers twitched, but I stayed still. The moment stretched. Her eyes flicked toward mine again, wet at the edges but unbroken. And then, quietly, deliberately, she asked, "What is it you really want from me?" The question hung there, heavy as the dusk settling around us. The question stayed with me. "What is it you really want from me?" I thought of a dozen answers, none of them safe. None of them simple. But I didn't get to answer. The next morning, she wasn't at the cafe. Nor the next. By the third day, I gave up pretending I was only there for the coffee. I left my cup untouched, scrolling through meaningless notifications on my phone just to avoid looking at the empty seat by the window. On the fourth morning, she appeared again, but not alone. A man walked in with her. Older than me by at least 20 years, though not quite her age. His hand rested on the small of her back in a way that felt too familiar. She glanced around, saw me instantly, and something in her face faltered before smoothing over. They sat at her table. Our table. She didn't open her notebook. She didn't look at me. I left without finishing my drink. At the office, she avoided me. Not overtly, she was professional, polite, all business. But she never lingered, never passed by my desk without reason, never offered the smallest crack in her composure. By evening, the silence was unbearable. I walked the long way home, past the cafe even though it was closed. The chairs were stacked, the lights dimmed. Her window seat sat empty again, as if it had never belonged to anyone. That night, my phone buzzed. A message. From her. We need to stop. It's not fair to you. I read it over and over. No explanation. No name for the man. Just that, we need to stop. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. My thumb hovered, useless, above the screen. Finally I wrote, if you didn't care, you wouldn't be texting me at midnight. I didn't send it. The next day at work, I caught her alone in the break room. She was rinsing her cup, back turned. I almost walked out. Almost. Instead, I said, I got your message. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn. It was clear enough, wasn't it? You didn't have to explain? My voice cracked on the last word. She set the cup down carefully, like even porcelain couldn't survive the weight of what she carried. Then she faced me. He's my ex-husband. We're trying to see if there's anything left. The words landed like a punch I hadn't braced for. I wanted to ask, do you want there to be? But I didn't. Instead, I said, so what about me? Her eyes softened, and for a moment I thought she might reach out. She stopped herself. Her jaw tightened. You're young. You'll move on. But the way her voice broke, the way her hand gripped the counter edge, told me she didn't believe her own words. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I unfolded the napkin I'd crumpled days ago. Smoothed it flat. Tried to convince myself it was just paper. Nothing more. But I couldn't throw it away. After her confession about the ex-husband, things shifted. Not all at once, more like a door closing inch by inch, quietly, until one day it was just shut. She stopped coming to the cafe. The first morning I thought maybe she overslept. The second, I told myself it was meetings. By the third, I stopped pretending. I tried skipping the cafe too, thinking maybe it would make it easier. But it didn't. The absence followed me like a shadow, every corner of the office, every half-second when I thought I caught her eyes and realized she wasn't looking at me at all. When she did speak to me, it was clipped. Professional. Efficient. Like she had rebuilt every wall I'd accidentally leaned against. One afternoon, I overheard her in the hall. Talking to someone, maybe her sister, maybe a friend. He doesn't need this complication, she said low and firm. I didn't stay to hear the rest. Complication. That's what I was. That night, I went back to the cafe anyway. Ordered the same medium drip, no sugar, no milk. Sat in our spot by the window. Alone. Her chair across from me felt heavier than if she'd actually been in it. I thought about her son, the one she'd mentioned only in passing. The one who didn't approve. I thought about the ex-husband, suddenly back in the picture. All the lives she carried that I never touched. I imagined what it would feel like if she walked through the door right then, spotted me, smiled that half-smile. The one that had started all of this. For a moment, the thought filled me with a strange, stubborn hope. But the door stayed closed. Hope drained into something colder. Confusion. Withdrawal. Like I'd been offered a glimpse of something extraordinary, and then told, gently but firmly, it was never mine to hold. I pulled out my phone. Typed her name. You don't have to do this. Deleted it. I miss the mornings. Deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, I'll stop coming if that makes it easier. I stared at the words. My thumb hovered. I didn't press send. Instead, I slipped the phone back into my pocket, left the coffee half full on the table, and walked out into the night air. The chair across from me stayed empty, but it didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like something else. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late when it happened. The kind of late where the city had thinned out, lights dimmed, footsteps scattered. I wasn't planning to see her. I wasn't planning anything, really, just walking, trying to wear out the silence in my head. But then I saw her. She was standing outside the cafe, though it was long closed. Coat pulled tight, hair loose around her face. She looked like someone who had come to the wrong place on purpose, just to feel the weight of it. I stopped a few feet away. Neither of us spoke at first. Just the hum of a streetlight, the faint rustle of leaves. "You shouldn't be here," she said finally. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was tired. "Neither should you," I answered. She almost smiled at that, but it faded. Her eyes moved past me, toward the empty window where we used to sit. "I thought avoiding you would fix it. That if I stayed away long enough, it would stop mattering." I waited. My hands stayed in my pockets, but my chest felt tight. "It didn't stop," she admitted. A pause. "And that scares me." The words landed between us like a confession, but also like a plea. I wanted to step closer, to close the space. Instead, I asked, "Scares you because of me?" Her eyes flicked up, finally meeting mine. "Because of me. Because I don't recognize myself in this. Not at this age. Not with you." The honesty in her voice was raw. Not dramatic, just unguarded. I took a breath. My throat was dry, but I said it anyway. "I keep telling myself it's nothing. That it's just mornings, just coffee, just work. But every time I see you, I don't want to leave." She closed her eyes for a second, like she'd been waiting for me to say it but dreading it too. When she opened them again, her gaze softened. "You'll regret me someday. Maybe not now. But you will." "Maybe," I said quietly. "But not tonight." The silence stretched again. Heavy, but not suffocating. Her hands trembled slightly as she crossed her arms, and without thinking, I stepped closer. Close enough that I could see the tired lines around her eyes, the way she chewed the inside of her lip. She didn't move away. For a moment, it felt like we were standing at the edge of something irreversible. A kiss, a collapse, something that couldn't be taken back. Instead, I only reached out and touched her sleeve. Barely more than a brush of fingers. Enough to make her inhale, sharp and quiet. Her lips parted like she might say something. But then she exhaled, steady this time, and whispered, "Okay." Just that. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forever. But it was real. And it was enough. Her voice still echoes in my head. "You are just an employee." But the way her eyes lingered told a different story. Coffee at 8:47, the quiet bench outside work, the silence that always felt louder than words. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just routine, until the night her hand trembled against mine. I almost said it. Almost crossed that line. But the world shifted, and I froze. Now every empty chair feels like her absence, every unread message feels heavier than the last. And yet when I close my eyes I can still hear her whisper, soft, unfinished, like a question she was afraid to ask. What if I answered it?